Story 1 by Reddit user The Willis. So last night, my friend contacted me as he needed a ride home from work and I was the only one available to do so. Initially, his dad was going to give him a ride, but he had an unexpected work emergency come up, so I was his last shot before asking a co-worker. He hates asking people he doesn't know closely for things. We live in Minnesota, so being as it was already 9:30 p.m. when he called me, it was dark outside at that point. Now when I say we live in Minnesota, I don't mean like way up north in the absolute middle of nowhere, but we live about halfway between St. Cloud and Minneapolis. The drive to pick him up was pretty uneventful as I took Country Road 10 from where I live to his location. Anyone who lives in Minnesota knows that this road is basically more of a highway for rural, smallish towns. I picked him up from the gas station he works at and started the trip to bring him home. Now my friend, I'll just refer to him as Jay so as not to include any direct names, lives out in one of the townships in Minnesota. This means that for the most part there are mostly either large pastures as there are lots of farms in these areas or woods, not much in between. This also means that Jay's house is for the most part in the middle of nowhere, and so are the back roads you need to take to get there. These back roads mean that there's just enough space on the road for 2 cars, and a bit more road each side for rumble strips to wake anyone who may fall asleep at the wheel before either a bunch of gravel or grass that leads to a ditch, and then finally woods or aforementioned pastures. I had my high beams on as there are lots of deer and other wildlife out at this time of year, so I wanted to see them before it's too late and they total my car. About halfway into the drive, I saw the outline of something in the middle of the road. I assumed this to be a deer, so I slowed down in order to avoid hitting it. Upon coming closer to the figure, however, I saw that it began to resemble a coyote more. This wasn't surprising to me though, as there are lots of those in Minnesota. They're like rats with how many of them there are. As we came closer to the figure, I got a really uncomfortable feeling as the coyote was refusing to move out of the middle of the road. Another reason that I felt uncomfortable was that while it did look like a coyote, it was just off-looking. Now I know how coyotes look. I was in Boy Scouts from kindergarten to 7th grade, and we'd seen plenty while being out camping. But this one, its front and hind legs were about 1.5 sizes too long. Its torso was oversized, and its neck was too long. To top this all off, it was also overly bony, and it looked like it hadn't eaten in weeks. This is very concerning, as there are plenty of small game that coyotes can feed on in this area. Already I wanted to be out of this place, just by the way the thing looked and the fact that it didn't take off immediately upon the car getting close to it. I really didn't feel like dealing with a rabid coyote. Now to get into the thing that unsettled me the most, as I drove off slightly off the road to go around the thing, I swear the thing looked straight at both of us. I know I wasn't the only one who felt this, as Jay spoke up. Kinda looks like it's staring at us, and gave a slight uneasy chuckle. Now when I say it looked at us, I don't mean looked at the car, but seemed to lock eye contact with us. Even more unsettling is that its eyes weren't yellow like typical coyotes, but were green and looked extremely bloodshot. After getting around it, I took off as fast as I could and finished bringing Jay home. He, of course, joked around and said things like, "Ooh, maybe it was a skinwalker," and laughed at how freaked out I was. The thing is though, this isn't the only time I've had an experience just like this, as I've had another situation when I was driving home from Alexandria around 11 p.m, to which I just shrugged off as it probably being a rabid coyote. But after last night, I'm 99% positive that thing was not just a rabid coyote. I know, I'm probably just letting my imagination get the best of me. But the fact that I've had something incredibly similar to this happen in the past makes me think that maybe it's not just a coincidence. Feel free to let me know what you all think, as I'd really like to get more people's input on this, and want to make sure I'm not going crazy. Nonetheless, I think I'm going to try and avoid backroads as much as I can for the next few months here. Who knows, maybe it'll have followed me now that I'm talking about it, and I'll have more stories in the near future. Story 2. By Reddit user Fabulous Marzipan 77. This happened 12 years ago, and to this day I still consider myself lucky. The morning was cool as we loaded into the ambulance, heading out to a call at the edge of town. It was 6:12 a.m., and it was still dark outside. We were called in by the police station saying that there were multiple wounded and a few dead at what seemed to be a farm. We didn't actually know what caused the injuries, but we made our way to the scene. The address took us to a dirt road that led us to a home that had 2 police cars outside with their lights on, but we didn't see any officers posted. There was no one there. The home was attached to the farm that seemed to be either deserted or just really old, but my main focus was on the cop cars out front. Typically, when they are called to a scene, there is at least one police officer guiding us to where we needed to go. But there was no one. A situation like this could be dangerous. We could be heading into danger and not know it. The home's front door was open, but there weren't any lights on. There seemed to be blood on the front porch that led into the house. Having been in the field for 18 months, I was pretty hardened by the multiple calls with car crashes and even a triple homicide. But something about this call was different. For the first time being on a call, I was actually afraid. I decided that rather than just sitting around, that we should enter the home and try to find the injured people. I slowly entered the home with a flashlight and a medical bag. The blood that was on the porch led into the home and up the stairs. I made my presence known, but I got no response. I tried the lights, but they didn't work. What was this place? As I searched the bottom floor for clues, I started to hear muffled sounds coming from upstairs. It sounded like something very heavy being dragged across the floor. The other paramedics that were now with me also heard the sounds from upstairs, but they also seemed to feel scared. We heard the dragging sounds continue upstairs, slowly moving to the top stairs. Not thinking, I began to walk the stairs to see if there was anyone there. The blood on the stairs was thick, and it made it slippery since the floors were made with wood. I shined my light to the top of the stairs, having no idea what to expect. I slowly continued forward with the other paramedics behind me. We were halfway up the stairs when we saw a hand pull forward. A policeman who was on the ground. He continued to drag himself on the ground, revealing that his lower half was missing. "Get out of here before it sees you," he said with extreme pain. My medical training must have kicked in as I ignored his warning and I rushed to his aid at the top of the stairs. At the top of the stairs, I could see what remained of the officer and the trail of blood that he produced that came to another set of stairs leading to what appeared to be the attic. The 2 paramedics that were with me attended the officer at the top of the stairs, and I ventured slowly to the stairs of the attic. Above me, I could hear sounds that I'm not able to describe, but they were terrifying in nature. Sounds that I assumed to be grunts or something very large eating. My flashlight was the only thing illuminating my path in the long hallway leading to the attic stairs. The hallway was long and unfurnished. I could see scratches on some of the walls and floors, although blood covered most of the floor. I had no idea what was happening here, or more importantly, what was still happening, but I assumed due to the blood and lack of personnel at the scene that there were many that still required my help, although the scene was most likely dangerous. I've experienced violence before while on duty. Many people while in shock can be aggressive and numb to pain, while subduing them can be quite the task. I wasn't necessarily preparing for violence, although it's never outside the realm of possibility. I proceeded to the attic steps alone, flashlight in hand. I was tempted to announce my presence, but I decided against it. I had the feeling that I never experienced before, but the best I could describe it was that I was about to meet the devil, as if the literal embodiment of evil was up those stairs. I walked up the stairs, slowly hearing sounds much clearer. Sounds that didn't sound good. I was about to reach the top of the stairs when I heard a loud sound coming from downstairs and a rushing of people entering the home. I quickly turned around and ran down the stairs over to the other paramedics and the officer, who was in grave condition. Coming up the stairs was a SWAT team in full gear. This would be the first and last time I'd ever see a SWAT team come to a scene. They ordered us all downstairs and told us to leave the officer. The officer was bandaged but unresponsive due to the blood loss. They asked me, "Where is it?" sternly, and I pointed to the attic stairs. They rushed the stairs leading to the attic with their weapons drawn, and we went down the stairs. From the bottom floor, we could hear screeching and gunfire coming from the attic. A lot of gunfire. We were ushered outside by more members of the SWAT team. By this time, the sun was starting to rise, and not only did the SWAT team arrive, but also government officials in suits. They pulled us aside and asked us questions. They asked us what we saw and who was all inside. Thankfully, we hadn't seen much, so we told them the truth. I asked them, what was going on? What was inside? They didn't answer me, and they told me to attend the people that they'll be bringing out. They brought out 7 bodies that day. 7 mangled bodies. None of them fully intact, however the one officer missing both legs ended up surviving. What happened here? What did they shoot in the attic? What was I about to see in the attic had the SWAT team not arrived? I'm just glad that I wasn't one of those bodies. Before I continue to the next story, I just want to say thank you for choosing to watch this video, and I hope you're enjoying my narration. If you are, please show your appreciation by liking and leaving a comment on this video, and also subscribing to my channel. Story 3 by Reddit user Not Necessarily. I live in a rural town, far away from the bustling urban cities that many people live in. It's like those stereotypical small neighborhoods where everyone knows each other. I like living here, in the fresh, unpolluted air with kind and friendly neighbors all around me. However, our town has a dark secret that no one speaks about. It's the woods right next to the town. Everyone in the town had gone to the woods at least once. We usually had some people go hunting there during the season, and also had plenty of people go for walks there. However, growing up, we have always heard terrible rumors about the forest. Amongst all the stories about mythical creatures and weird caves, one story in particular has stuck with me. The story goes like this. Around 30 years ago, back when most of our parents were also teenagers, one of 4 teenagers decided to go camping in the summer holidays. Their parents supported it, and so they set off after a couple of days of preparation. On the first day, they quickly set up their tents and went ahead and started to do a bit of exploration before settling down and setting up a campfire for the night. Towards the late evening, one of the teens, David, the only survivor, felt like something was wrong. He had that deep gut feeling, the one that grips your heart with an icy grip. He didn't know how to vocalize this to his friends, but he did tell them he felt something was wrong. Imagine sitting with your friends in an open forest with tall dark trees, a rather small campfire being the only source of light. You could say David was just scared, but he swore he could see a blur of movement in the thick darkness of the trees every now and then. He felt completely exposed out in the middle of nowhere, with the wind whistling against the trees. And then it happened. His friend Richard also noticed the movement in the trees. It was subtle before, but now it constantly appeared all around them. It was the blur of a dark humanoid figure that kept disappearing and then reappearing in some other spot again. It happened to always be out of the perimeter of the light of the campfire, so none of its details could ever be made out. By now, the teenagers were spooked, and everyone had realized that there was definitely something out there. It was also hard to convince each other that the movement was nothing more than a wild animal, when the figure was, quite obviously, humanoid in shape. The group had two choices: to run back home quickly through the dark forest and be careful not to lose their way or trip and hurt themselves out in the middle of nowhere, or to stay put at the campsite and wait until the morning to return home. That same figure began to move more frantically through the shadowy silhouettes of the trees, seeming like it was circling them like a predator hunting its prey. David decided to make a run home through the woods as the others yelled out after him. He would later say it was a gut instinct that told him to run as far away as he could from that thing, to continue running until his legs burned and his lungs felt like they were being pulled apart. As soon as David ran halfway to the line of the trees, the creature suddenly stopped moving, causing David to freeze. A menacing silence descended upon the forest. The group, with the exception of David, was still huddled around the campfire, shivering not from the cold, but from fear. The leaves began to rustle beyond the tree line, and slowly but surely the figure that had been circling and watching them for some time now appeared out of the tree line. Its features began to be illuminated by the light from the campfire. The group's screams filled the silence. As David would later describe it, the creature had a humanoid body and was wearing long track pants and a hoodie. However, it had something very, very wrong about it. Its face was upside down. The large circular bloodshot eyes were in place of the mouth, while the nose was twisted and pointed upwards. The mouth of the creature was contorted into an upside-down grin, which almost looked like a cartoonish frown. The teeth were razor-sharp and yellow with stains of red. Its skin was pale and thin with blue veins visible all over the face. Its fingernails ended in long, sharp points like daggers. As the group stared at the creature in frozen fear, it lunged in a fraction of a second towards the three teenagers still next to the campfire. It used its nails to rip everyone apart in a few agonizing moments, like a paper shredder to a piece of paper. It then hungrily fed on the flesh of the dying teenagers. David broke out of his trance as soon as the creature locked its misplaced eyes directly with his. He turned around and began to run into the woods. The creature moved at an incredibly fast pace as it caught up to him in a matter of seconds. It grabbed David's arm and dug its nails deep into his shoulder until David's shrill screams could be heard from the town. It all happened in slow motion. David continued to pull away from the creature in a desperate attempt to run and get away from it, but the creature had a very solid grip of his entire arm. The creature had made one mistake though, which let David survive. It had dug its nails so far into David's arm that after a long few moments of David desperately pulling away, his entire arm ripped away from his body. David would later continue running until he collapsed from blood loss. An early morning runner would find him by the side of the running trail, and he would make a miraculous recovery in a city hospital. The campsite would be found later by a rescue crew, covered in blood and gore with the barely recognizable bodies of the three teenage boys, arranged in a triangle around the long-dead campfire. David is still alive today, and he's told this story to every kid in town. You can see him stare out into the woods with his only hand leaning on the wooden fence of his balcony, watching the tree line with his blank, empty eyes. People in our town would only go to the woods during the morning and be sure to come back before sunset. It's not that anyone fully believed David's story. Some thought he had developed false memories from the traumatic event, while some say he could have dreamed it up in his medically induced coma. But no one can deny the fact that that night something did happen in the woods. People may have tried to comfort themselves by not believing his story, but no one dared camping in the woods again. This brings me back to my story. Yesterday, I missed my typical morning run because of a work obligation, and so I decided to still exercise in the evening. The sun had mostly dipped under the horizon, and the sky had started to darken from the orange and purple colour to a rather dark blue. The trees stood on either side of the trail, where only darkness existed beyond the tree line. I was running pretty fast and nearly back out of the woods, and at home, when the sound of the birds completely stopped. A deafening silence permeated the air like the calm before a storm. I began to run even more frantically as bad thoughts began to appear in my mind. Just as I was at the end of the trail and out of the woods, I saw a blur of a figure right beside me, staring at me from the tree line. I could swear that just as I made it out of the woods, it disappeared back into the tree line with a frown on its face. Except there was something wrong with the face. It was upside down. Story 4. By Reddit user NaughtyBoy69. So like 4 years ago, a step-cousin of mine and some of his stupid-ass school friends started a wildfire in a small forest. He got beat up by the firefighters. We always thought it was horrible, and we could always see the burnt stumps from the highway where we went to pick up my mum from the school she works at. I am sure the forest fire is what made this thing come out of hiding. That year, a wave of suicides burst onto the town, where her tiny school is located. There are 2 different towns really near to another, like 10 minutes. I don't know if it can be related to the thing I saw and heard, but I am pretty sure if you were being stalked by that creature, not many people would want to keep going. And now, to the actual encounters. It was late at night. I was in my room, the last one on the second floor of my house. I was watching YouTube videos because of the pandemic. The car flow on the highway in front of my house had dropped massively, so it was weirdly silent. Suddenly, I heard the crunching of leaves on the ground. It usually wouldn't scare me because we have cats, and those bastards love leaves. But then, I sadly realized the crunches were slow footsteps, and they were getting closer and closer to my bedroom. And then, I smelled the stench. It was like that one time we forgot a piece of meat in one of our cabinets. I am paralyzed. I have rhinitis, so my sense for smell is stronger than that of a normal human. The stench is making me gag, and then I hear it. 3 knocks on my window. 3 knocks, made by some hard object. They were soft enough, as if someone hit it with their nail against a large glass window of a balcony, that my dad never finished. It could not have been a stick or a branch, because my dad cut most of the branches of the 3 trees next to my window earlier that day. I just lay there, silently, trying to take a glimpse of it through the mirror that is in front of the window, but the curtains won't let me. After a few minutes, I could hear the crunches move away. The day after, I went to our laundry room, that's a space with no walls besides the back of my house. I could not shake the feeling that something was watching me. Then, I heard my mum calling me from the trees near the neighbour's house. I was certain my mum was inside the house, so I picked up the clothes basket and ran inside. Nothing happened after these events, but a few dead cats and dogs turned up from my neighbours. It's been a few months and I still feel weird while remembering this, and especially while writing it, since stories say that when you say their name and spread their tales, it's like inviting them in. I am scared. Story 5. This story was submitted to me directly. What I'm about to share with you is something that happened to me a few months back. It felt like a dream, but I'm still not sure if it was a dream or not. The memory of it still terrifies me, and if it really wasn't a dream, then I fear I may have narrowly escaped death. This is my story. I live in the northern area of Canada in a remote rural town about 10 miles away from the city where I work as a real estate agent. I've been in this business for about 5 months now, and I love my job. I work the usual hours for a standard week. You know, the standard Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. I always take the main highway to and from work so as to save a little money for gas each week. A few weeks ago, after a really busy day at the office, I was on my way home from work. I had dealt with many clients that day and needed to stay back an hour and a half. It was a really rough day, and I was eager to get home. As I made my way across the highway, I caught a glimpse of flashing red and blue lights ahead. I slowed down and discovered there had been a major accident on the highway. From what I could see, a large truck had overturned and was blocking off the highway. Just great, I thought, exactly what I needed. A long wait in a traffic jam. I was about to slump back in my seat when I remembered that a short way up and to the left was a back road that would lead all the way back to my house. I was a little hesitant at first because this particular road and area was prone to carjackings, crashes, muggings, and a number of unsavoury incidents. But I decided that the risk was better than waiting in this goddamn traffic for another 2 to 3 hours. So as the line of cars moved on, and I neared the road, I turned my car left and drove off down the winding path. Curiously, I noticed that no one else seemed to be taking the road I had chosen, but I just shrugged it off. The back road I was on was a few miles longer than the highway and runs through an area of thick and dense forest. I was about 3/4 of the way home when I heard this weird rattling sound. Feeling concerned, I pulled to the side and stopped the car, and just as I did, there was a loud bang from the front of the vehicle, and steam began to rise from the bonnet. Great, I thought, more to worry about. I got out of the car to survey the damage, and the first thing I noticed was that it seemed unnaturally cold. And I say this because we are currently in the middle of summer, and the temperature must have easily been barely above 0. But at that moment, I had more important things to be concerned about. I checked the damage to the car and noticed that not only was the radiator shot, but one of my tyres had blown, which explained the loud bang when I first stopped the car. Getting a little frustrated now, I dug out my phone and called up one of the major roadside assistance places in the city. When I finally got through, the man said it would be at least 2 hours for him to get to me, as he had had dozens of calls from around the city. Sighing, I accepted the wait and hung up. I sat on the hood of my car playing the day over in my head. I was annoyed to say the least. It was at this moment that the cold I had only barely noticed before seemed to really register. Not only that, but the woods surrounding the road seemed eerily quiet. I shivered slightly and was just about to get back into my car to stay warm when I froze, having just noticed something out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head to the left to see what looked to be a pair of bright yellow eyes disappearing into the dark. I shivered a little remembering that this road was prone to muggings, carjackings, not to mention countless wild bears. Now normally I could brush something like this off, but something felt wrong. As soon as the eyes disappeared, I had turned back to staring at the road for the moment. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Feeling nervous, I decided to take my phone out to call my sister to pick me up instead of waiting for the tow truck to arrive. As the phone began to ring, the feeling of being watched began to grow stronger, and I started to get a very unpleasant feeling in my gut. The phone rang a few times, and then crackled out and died. Forgetting the feeling for a moment, I walked away from my car holding my phone out in the air. I figured I must have lost my reception and had decided to see if I could get a few bars by walking in a different direction. I hadn't planned to walk far from my car as it was now getting dark. I'd only walked about 30 meters from my car when I froze again. My body had gone cold. Not the sort of cold you get from a chilly winter's night, but a searing wave of cold. I felt like my blood had turned to ice. I lowered my phone and looked up, and felt like a feeling of pure terror sweep across my entire body. Crouched by the edge of the woods about 50 or so meters from where I was standing was what looked like a pale, oddly malformed deer with glowing yellow eyes. Immediately, I knew that this was the thing that had been watching me. I stared at it for a moment, transfixed in terror, and it was as I looked at the thing that I realized it was not a deer at all. It had antlers on its head like a deer, but its face was mutilated and looked wrong. It almost resembled a human's face crossed with a deer's skull. There were clumps of flesh missing from its entire body, which appeared abnormally thin. Its long arms were tipped with impossibly long and razor-sharp claws. I took several steps back. I had no idea what I was looking at, but that unpleasant gut feeling I felt before was now overwhelmingly strong, and even from here, I could smell the foul stench of rotting meat. As I backed up a few more steps, the creature slowly began to rise. And this was when I noticed it was at least 8 feet tall. Unable to look away, I froze again, watching the creature in horror as its mouth opened and revealed rows of needle-sharp teeth that appeared to be covered in blood. As it opened its mouth, I had expected it to let out a growl of sort, but was truly horrified when instead, it spoke. And not just with any voice, but with what sounded like the man from the tow truck service, telling me something along the lines of that they'll be with me in about 10 minutes. The creature stopped speaking, and then let out what was unmistakably the laugh of a small child, mixed with a faint sound of a large, guttural animal. It sounded like it was playing with me, but I got the feeling it would not continue to do so for long. I backed away slowly towards my car, and for every step I took, the creature responded with a step forward of its own. Matching my speed and pace perfectly, I stopped as I reached my car and noticed I had left the door open. I gently leaned down and pulled the pistol I kept in the pocket of the door out. As I removed the gun, I noticed that the creature's ears twitched, and it spoke again, this time with a different voice. The voice of my sister, whom I had just tried to call moments ago. "Hey bro, it's okay. Don't be scared. I'm not going to hurt you. Why didn't you come closer?" On pure instinct, I brought the gun up and fired off 6 shots into the creature's chest. It screamed. The sound echoed out everywhere. It sounded like something I could only make out to be between an agonized moose, a grizzly bear, and the terrified scream of what I could only describe as that of a young woman. The creature charged at me, and I turned and ran. I had no idea where I was going, for I had dropped my phone and was running blindly in the darkness, desperate to get away from the monstrous creature that was chasing me. I could hear it behind me. It was gaining on me, getting closer and closer. The foul stench of rotting meat and death filled my nostrils, and I could hear the sound of its breath and its feet behind me as it gave chase. A huge wave of adrenaline hit me, and I put on an extra burst of speed. As I was unable to see where I was going, I tripped over something in the dark and fell, sliding down what I could only think to be a large embankment on the edge of the forest. I tried to brace myself and stop my body from slamming into a tree. Eventually, I came to a stop, and I passed out. I woke up feeling sore and bruised, glancing around, taking in my surroundings. It was at this moment that I noticed I was not lying in the middle of the woods, but I was back in my own bed. I blinked for a second, staring around my room. How did I get back here? The last thing I remembered was being chased by something across the back road I had been driving on, and tripping over something, and tumbling down the side of what felt like a large hill. I leapt out of bed, trying to make sense of it all, when I realized I was in the same clothes I was in from when I was last awake. Except now, my clothes were all dirty and torn. With the terrifying idea that what I had experienced last night may not have been a dream, I darted outside to see if my car, which had broken down, was in the driveway or not. Sure enough, there it was. My car sitting in the driveway. One tire still blown out from whatever I had hit earlier. I checked under the hood to find that my radiator was still blown. I was starting to feel a little scared, because if what I had seen in front of me was to be believed, then that means that the previous night was real, and somehow I had mysteriously ended up back home along with my broken-down car. After this event to this day, I still cannot explain what had happened or how I ended up back home. But occasionally, as I'm driving along the highway after work, having now gotten my car repaired, I swear that sometimes I can see a dark shape following along in the tree lines, or catch a glimpse of what appears to be a pair of glowing yellow eyes watching my car go by from the tree line. I haven't seen the creature again, but I'm sure it's still out there, watching me and waiting for me. Thank you for watching and/or listening to this video. Again, if you enjoyed it, please go ahead and hit the like button. And if you don't already, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and select the notification bell so don't miss out on any of my future uploads. Also, please leave a comment on this video letting me know what you thought of it. Comments really help with the YouTube algorithm and will really help my channel to grow. If you have a story you would like me to narrate, please email it to me at stories@daredeveril.com. I'm getting close to my next major milestone of 100,000 subscribers to this channel. Thank you to everyone who is continuing to subscribe to this channel and contributing to its growth by liking videos and leaving comments. Once I get to 100,000 subscribers, my plan is to reward you all with an epic video with over 3 hours of original content. It will probably be about Wendigos, as you all seem to love these stories. If that is the sort of thing you want to hear, please keep helping this channel to grow. If you want to support my channel even further, there are a number of ways you can do so. You can buy me a coffee on my Ko-fi account, which I recently set up. It's still in the early stages of being set up, but I plan to release some exclusive content on there in the future. Check out my Teespring store and consider purchasing one of my shirt designs. I have a design with a dogman, a Wendigo, skinwalker and Bigfoot, all on a zebra crossing. It's a must for anyone that likes these types of stories. You can also head over to Audible, where there is the book Punch by J.R. Park that I narrated. I get a small royalty if you decide to purchase it. Thanks again for watching.